What is your first memory of doing a craft?
My first memory of doing craft is about 1947 when I was talking about making the purse at school, and I was so proud of this little purse I'd made. I went into one of the other classrooms and brought one of the older girls that I knew in to look at it, and I was so proud. And I still remember these years later the teacher saying to me, "Oh, so that's yours, you're the one that's taken a double ration of cotton to make it." And it really spoilt that very special moment of my proud purse for me.
What crafts do you do now?
I like doing sewing and knitting and sugar craft, which is making flowers and cakes out of sugar.
So did you ever make any of those sugar paper flowers for any friends or family?
Yes, I used to make a lot of wedding cakes. They were really to go on wedding cakes. And then from there it expanded. We didn't just do flowers, we made boxes and all sorts of things. So it was a skill and a craft that you could expand.
What crafts did you do at school?
Well, I was taught to sew and taught to do some knitting and papier-mâché, which I used to like to do, where you soak the paper and make it into models. I see you have some of these in your school.
Yeah.
Look excellent.
Did you do any of these things for special occasions?
In later life, when I left school, yes, I did. I made papier-mâché over balloons, a blown-up balloon, and then made them for my children and friends' children when we had parties and dressed them all as different things. But the initial skill came from the papier-mâché.
What do you enjoy about crafts?
Well, I think I enjoyed using my hands to make things and always, of course, seeing the finished result. And I think you'll find when your ceramics are finished, now you're just looking at them as a dull thing, dull paint and the white glaze. But when they've been in the oven, it's like magic when you see them. You'll just feel absolutely thrilled with them. And that's what I think you get from doing crafts. The finished result is always good. And you know that you've done something with your own hands and made something, which is important.
So you really don't mind getting dirty, like creating something
No,
new?
no, I'm very dirty. That's why I've got this on to cover my clothes up. Yes, and when we were working with the clay, I was even dirtier.
What crafts did your parents do and your grandparents do?
Well, during the war, they hadn't so much time for crafts because everything was rationed and it was hard to find knitting wool because people weren't producing things like that. They were all doing war work. But you could get basic things, and my mother used to knit, and she used to make clothes for my sister and myself because they weren't in the shops to buy.
Okay. Who taught you about your crafts?
Well, initially at school, I was born in 1940, so you can tell how old I am. So I was 7 in 1940. Well, for half of it, for half of 1947, I was also 6. And we had big, thick needles, and we knitted with a fine ball of string. And I was very proud of my first dishcloth, which I gave to my mother and lasted for a long, long time. And then my mother taught me how to follow a knitting pattern, a complicated knitting pattern. So when I was 11, I was able to knit, I knitted my first cardigan that was quite a lacy one when I was about 11 or 12.
Do you remember to make and do and mend?
Make, do and mend during the war. You couldn't always buy clothes, so you could get material, some material. So a lot of ladies learnt to make things, make their own garments. And if they began to wear out, I bet you've never darned a sock, have you? Now, I was taught to darn by my grandmother, and it was like a mushroom, a wooden mushroom, and you used to push it up the sock and weave across the hole. Because you couldn't just go out and buy another pair of socks or throw them in the bin if they got a little hole in. You had to mend them, darn them, and that was making do with what you had and mending it. I can alter things, and I have made the occasional garment for myself, but I'm not very good at doing things like putting zips in, but I could take up a pair of trousers or alter the waist or a skirt or something like that. Basic. We had clothing coupons, you see, in the war. You just couldn't go out and buy what you want. You had clothing coupons, and if you'd spent your clothing coupons, say, on a coat or something, you hadn't anything left for socks. So you had to make all your clothes last as long as you possibly could.
Okay. Who have you passed your skills to?
Well, I did teach in adult education and I taught crafts of different sorts, so I passed it on to a lot of people. And I've passed some on to my grandchildren, the girls anyway. I've tried to teach them to knit, although not terribly successfully. But when a bit like you've done with your clay, when I taught sugar craft and I taught other crafts as well, like silk screen printing and tie-dyeing and all sorts of crafts. But we also did bread dough. Do you know about doing bread dough, salt dough?
No.
And I have taught my grandchildren how to do that, and they have made gifts for their parents, Christmas things. They've come to me for one night a week for a few weeks and made these things. And like this, you paint them and then varnish them. And the mummies still have them hanging on the wall, so that's very nice.
They must be really pretty then.
And they'll be able to remember to do that. I hope they remember to do that with their children when they grow up.
Have you ever made things for your house?
Yes, I've made a lot of things for my house. Do you know Irish linen? You know that linen that comes from Ireland is very special.
Yes.
And I bought quite a lot of it and I made it into, I crocheted round the edges and made it into drinks mats and napkins. And that was lovely because it was something you could do whilst you were sitting with a crochet hook. So it didn't take a lot of room and I love doing that.
And do you still have any of these mats?
Yes,
left?
I have, yes. And I use them when I have people in, when I'm entertaining, and they wash and I starch them and they always look very nice. So it shows that if you put a lot of hard work into something and use good quality materials, they are going to last a long time.
Your family, did you struggle trying to pass the time doing crafts or something?
Well, my father was away in the war for 5 years, so my mother was on her own with my sister and myself. But we did spend a lot of time in the northeast because my mother's family came from County Durham. And we used to go up there quite a lot, from me being a tiny baby. My sister actually went to school up there, so we went into a more family life there. And all the men were away at the war, so the women used to knit and sew, and I had an aunt who was an excellent sewer, and I have her sewing machine now. I don't use it anymore. I have an electric one, but it was a treadle one that you put your feet on the treadle and worked the machine with a treadle, and then they went on to one that you worked with a little wheel at the side. And my aunt used to make my sister and my clothes, and we had some beautiful clothes because she was very skilled.
Does any of your family have stuff that you made?
My sister may have, because my sister is an extremely good sewer and she teaches it. So this craft, from us watching our parent, well, my mother and grandmother and aunts, has been passed down, I think, to my sister, particularly in sewing, because she is fantastic. She does very complicated things, like some of the things you see here in your school. My sewing skills aren't as good as hers, but I am a better knitter.
Yes, you are better at something.
It's like a family thing, isn't it? You pass down your skills and we'll get better at stuff. We'll know how to do more stuff in the future, won't we?
We will, but I think one of the worries is you all have your mobile phones and your little games and so much television that it's quite worrying to think that you may not carry on doing these things because there are so many other things to do, computers and everything, that you may not just find time to sit down and do something that you've made with your own hands. And when you look at it, you feel very proud because you think, I've done that. And I think that's very important.
Yeah, because of all the TV and everything, we're all like hooked into something and say, okay, I'm going to do that in a minute as soon as the programme finishes. When you switch over to something else, you say, oh, I'll just watch this.
Yes.
And
But you see, we
eventually-
hadn't television
Maybe
when I
she
was
needs a rest.
into my teens. We didn't have television. My grandparents were the first person that I knew to get a television, and I used to go there to watch it, but we didn't have one. So we did have much more time to fill. So perhaps that's why crafts in those days were more important for us, because we had time to do them.
Okay, well, I think we'll give you a rest now.
All right,
Thank you.
well, that's been very nice. Thank you.